octahedron is a place used for worship here. Follow beside. The octahedron was only 10 minutes walk from where we were. It was shaped literally as its name, although outside it simply looked like the shape of an Egyptian pyramid. Inside, the seats were all arranged in a pattern like that of a four-leaf clover, with the focus of attention in the center, the bottom of the down pyramidal shape. "Since people of any faith are welcome here," Piv said quietly, "there is nothing you could consider as a directed service. But there are opportunities for an individual to comment in the podium about an idea or feeling that they might have about something in their faith. Only do so with their own time in the podium. Only 4 responses are allowed, and that commentator say first if it is a response or a different commentary. We encourage them to agree with others, but taking the podium just to comment on an agreement about a previous topic is considered a waste of the podium's time usage, so that is not allowed for the speaker. As for worship songs, those are performed at the times stated in the papers among the seats. No one must sing for a faith they disagree with. Indeed, no one here considers it improper to remain silent, but no one is ever permitted to interrupt a worshiper unless there is an emergency or other important matter. Only one song at a given time is allowed, so that none overpowers the other." The octahedron, 10 minutes walk from where we were. It was shaped literally as its name, though outside it simply looked like the shape of an Egyptian pyramid. Inside, the seats were all arranged in a pattern like that of a four-leaf clover, with the focus of attention in the center, the bottom point of the down pyramidal shape. "Since people of any faith are welcome here," Piv said quietly, "there is nothing you could consider as a directed service. But there are opportunities for an individual to comment in the podium about an idea or feeling that they might have about something in their faith. Like a discussion forum, but responders to the person before them can only do so with their own time in the podium. Only 4 responders are allowed, and that commentator must say first if it is a response or a different commentary. We encourage them to agree with others, but taking the podium just to comment in agreement about a previous topic is considered a waste of the podium's time usage, so that is not allowed for the speaker. As for worship songs, those are performed at the time stated in the papers among the seats. No one must sing for a faith they disagree with. Indeed, no one here considers it improper to remain silent. But no one is ever permitted to interrupt a worshiper, unless there is an emergency or other important matter. Only one song at a given time is allowed, so that none overpowers another." On Earth, this might sound like a Unitarian agreement, though I am not one myself, so I can't be sure of that. Oruaural had explained that to me. Piv agreed. "I suppose there might be aspects that these would share, but we also work to celebrate the differences in faiths here. None really believe that the others from themselves to also be correct in everything. But here they are all allowed to express themselves in their own unique ways in fairly given allotments of worship time, both for day and night cycles. But this also means that, to truly be fair, we must also allow you a similar time, if you want to sing here." "Really?" I was very surprised. I hadn't expected or even thought about that. We both took positions in a row near the back. Piv impressively was able to keep her large metallic arachnid body from making too much noise. The seats appeared strange to me, but functional for my human shape. The space between the rows was actually large enough to accommodate her bigger chassis, but she simply lowered that to the floor, again while being surprisingly quiet. The legs rested in the same way I would have expected a spider's to. I bent forward a little and began. "God, if you created me, you must have also created this, so surely are here too. I don't know these people who attacked, or really why they would follow after such a foolish way of life. But I ask help them. They sound misguided, not realizing that there is more to life than weakness or strength. I don't know enough about this place to really understand what happens in things like that, but I pray that you help them see why they were wrong, and to help them see what righteousness is, to seek after that instead for strength. Amen. Now that I had a good quiet moment, I thought about my situation and realized that I hadn't actually asked Oruaural more about what Piv was. I knew that her body was obviously a metal machine in its nature, but so were Daleks. I was very grateful that she was nicer and not concerned about conquering or exterminating. But then what was she? A self-aware robot? A magically powered one? Or electrical? That side of me that loved my cad was burning to know. So, Piv, she turned to me as I remembered that I needed to be quiet here. What are you exactly? We have machines back on Earth called robots, but you're clearly more advanced. That's very nice of you to say so. I am indeed fully inorganic, at least in the sense as you understand it. The nature of the Thunklick is to use efficiency in everything we do and are. Please keep in mind that I am not saying that you mortals are a waste. Many of you can and do think in ways that we do not. Do you have much to ask about? You may, but this place also may not be the best place to answer them. I suppose it would be better for me to ask outside then. One moment, though. I must access the cobweb. Her eyes flashed briefly several times with a white light, and she appeared to be just staring straight ahead, not focused on anything obvious. Just as I was starting to wonder if I needed to go find Oruaural, she suddenly spoke up again. Oruaural has affirmed now that you do have authorization class obtuse. Do you want to see the example of the restricted knowledge? Restricted? What was that all about? I thought. Then replied, yeah, sure, if that's all right. Good. I have already updated my navigation system. We are presently 42 of your minutes and 27 of your seconds from the destination. As we had passed on our way, I saw a large and varied number of different types of people in the city that we passed by. Most seemed to be exceptionally curious about me, but only needed a few comments from Piv and went about their business. I had thought it a bit odd that I didn't see any other humans, but I certainly saw 4 other kinds of races, though. There were a few venal, like Constance. They resembled very closely a picture of an insect I had seen when I attended my science class in middle school, a mantid fly. From the praying mantis family of insects, it imitates a wasp to avoid being eaten by birds. The venal, though, walked around on 4 legs, had hands instead of the reaper-like appendages on mantises, and only did these people's wings look functional, they also looked much, much stronger. Their hands ended in sharply clawed fingers, some with stains on them that seemed to grab my attention, but I didn't want to spend a lot of time thinking about it. Others were also the examples I saw before in the other diner, or the knife-toothed soldiers. Basically, the average fantasy-type Naga, humanoid torso having 2 arms and a long snake tail, starting about where the hips were, but these had snake scales covering them completely. They also flicked their tongues out every so often like snakes, tasting the air. Another seemed to be, they were hard for me to avoid staring at, but have you ever seen a pangolin? Like an anteater covered in a natural armor plating. But these were stocky, walked around on 3 legs, and wow, they're strong. The first I saw, he was bringing in a whole tree, dragging it through the street on a skiff sled. Most of the minor branches had been trimmed off, but I was sure it still had to weigh maybe a couple of tons. It was only later I found out he was a carpenter, and that was pretty normal for him. Also, bats. I swear, if you could take your average large fruit bat or flying fox and have them be people instead, then they would be the Vunger. except that these walked around on their 2 feet. At least those who, like the Venal, weren't flying with their wings. The younger wings were behind their backs, while the arms were in front. I instantly thought of the classic Gothic cathedral-style gargoyle, but with a face that looked much more like a flying fox's. The legs were a bit closer together than a typical bat's, too. Exactly 42 minutes and 27 seconds after Piv had set her destination, we were standing in front of a door set inside a low hill. The emblem on it was a sword and shield, crowned with a chain of flowers from a species I had never seen before. Piv abruptly turned around to face me. Although these barracks are always available to the public at large, some areas of them are never available to the general public. Your authorization class, Obtuse, grants you access to any area now, to any information. That information includes what I was referring to, the underlying design of Thunklick bodies, how we function, only other Thunklick, and my emissary Oruaural may be allowed to know of it. That same permission coming directly from Oruaural extends to you as well, but you are being warned now not to share with anyone else here. Also, this may seem like a contradiction to that warning, but Oruaural has also ordered that you simply must write what you see in your novel. He said that a person named Chad would likely be most amused about the engineering involved. Please follow me to our maintenance and repair servicing area. I felt goose flesh on my arms, but proceeded after her anyway. We went our way through a small number of hallways, which, strange as it felt, seemed arranged like an office building. Before long, though, we were at a large room that was clearly being used for maintenance and repair of Thunklick bodies. Some were sitting in their at-rest positions, but their eyes were flashing with white light, rapidly fluctuating between bright and dim. There was another having parts in her leg being tuned or replaced by a sort of service technician Thunklick, who had a much smaller arachnid body than the others. The Thunklick that seemed to be active were eating what looked like wood? Now, mortal, Piv riveted my attention back again. As I said before, few of your kind ever see this, and only then in the highly unlikely event that one of us is damaged enough in battle. You may feel startled by this, but it is not to be concerned over. Then I watched as she braced her arachnid half so that it was suddenly in a locked-up sort of rigid state. Then, only a few seconds later, I heard the sounds of gears and metal moving inside her abdomen, the hissing clicks of hatches releasing. There were 4 panels lifting up and away from that part of her, all revealing inside a vertical drum-shaped metal canister about twice the size of the average plastic paint bucket. There was a massive, complicated-looking tangle of pipes leading from it and into the rest of her body. On both sides of the canister were solid, heavy-looking metal wheels, still turning very fast, but noticeably slowing down now. Even though I was half expecting a shocking surprise, I didn't feel so, but instead absorbed into staring at every detail I could. So much so that I almost didn't quite notice Piv's voice coming from behind me. You really are impressed, as she laid a bronze hand on my shoulder. But then I am a good bit of quality metal tooling. I jumped a little and quickly turned around. Somehow, Piv had extracted her torso from out of the arachnid half of herself, standing in front of me on a tripod-like set of 3 thin rods of legs. After breaking out of more staring, I managed to ask, Is that part of it too? Your separation of your body's halves? Another aspect not for average mortals to see? Oh, this? Piv chortled again, gesturing to her tripod. No, we only do this when trying to get into a small space or when dealing with a frightened, perhaps unstable individual who simply needs to recognize that we don't want to threaten them. Most mortals here are used to it, though seeing this often does shock new visitors, who never stop amusing me when I get to see their reactions. No, what I was talking about was that tangle of pipes in their canister, along with those wheels. Right now, it's all simply entering idle, but that is what keeps me active. Your world actually has a coincidentally identical design. Perhaps you'd like to guess? Though admittedly it was only widely used in your world's 19th century and a bit into your early 20th century. I continued looking back at the engine, examining all the parts. I concentrated hard, trying to remember what I had seen of the steam engines. But then I started to notice the heat fins on the casings, where the pistons plunged into their block, and how each had a line feeding directly from it what looked like a small furnace. That can't be right, I thought. Is that a Stirling engine? I was shocked, but amused at the same time. Yes, she also was amused, but probably more with me being shocked, I felt. It is all powered by my internal furnace, there, which must be kept at the temperature that is constantly hotter than the surrounding air. That is why you see us eating wood, but it works with anything combustible. My torso here has a way of storing both kinetic and electrical energy from the larger body. I can then use the auxiliary energy storage units inside it to continue moving when apart from my main battle chassis. But my torso alone, if relying on just those storage units, is substantially weaker than when joined with my engine and its furnace. Although I have been built to be a counselor and keeper of the peace, I have also been built for war. The engine and furnace give my body the strength to perform as a powerful guardian alongside the others in our duty to defend the shifting stones. I can endure many things that a mortal cannot, and unlike the Ellen, no Thunklick ever feels weaker for leaving this plane, even temporarily, in the performance of her duties. At this point, I was starting to wonder if Oruaural had really told me everything I needed to know. From what he explained to me last night, it felt like he held back this Ellen thing. He talked about them, including why he was one now, but not about them becoming weaker like this. What do you mean by weaker? I asked. I thought they couldn't ever become weaker, as Oruaural's recall of experience suggested to please again. Oruaural has already explained what he and the other emissaries are, the greater Ellen. The lesser Ellen are also powerful spirits, basically, but not as powerful as the greater Ellen. Most align as you might interpret it. Most align themselves to either a loyal emissary or a rebellious one, good or evil, as you might interpret it. However, the emissaries' morality systems are different than what you relate to. Oruaural has already explained Earth's morality value system to me, though I will hear you out if you want to comment on it. But to understand it here for perspective, most believe that Buzast is the closest in what you would call evil. He genuinely believes that the only purpose for the weak is to serve the strong, and that war is beautiful, in allowing one the opportunity to prove themselves by overwhelming their opponent through force. He also believes that the imperfections of the great creator can only be rectified by purging them from the creation in total annihilation. I quietly thought about this, and in some ways it sounded like the conflict between God and the devil. He does sound evil, I commented, but I don't know if I'm reading too much into this, but you said I would call him evil? What is that? Because it's all a matter of perspective. In the general opinion of others, Buzast is all of those aligned to him. The world at large considers them to actually be evil, but they themselves only see it as being fully devoted to their causes, that it is for the greater perfection of creation. Oruaural believes that true evil is someone who pursues after behavior that is considered evil and still accepts it as evil, completely ignoring what you would call a conscience. On Earth, I said, that sounds like what we would call a sociopath. Yes, but even a sociopath might be diagnosed as it, and then given a chance to take efforts to change themselves towards more benevolent behavior. True evil, Oruaural says, knows that they say or do evil things, but don't care about changing or stopping what they do. Buzast and his minions blind themselves to their evil. thinking that it's for the perfection of creation. But the delusion means an impure state of evil, even if they are still evil. Oruaural calls them foolishly evil, and is both angered and amused by him at the same time. Possessed fights against all who would oppose him, the great creator, and all the rest of creation. I feel like I'll ask more about that at another time. So I've noticed something else that I'm curious about. All of you are female. Yes, she replied matter-of-factly. Of course we are. And as such, you know that your eyes are functional. No, I quickly began again. Why are you all female? No males. I know you're machines, but I trailed off as I tried to think about my obvious question. As you had already pointed out just now, we are machines, and so have no need for organic reproduction systems. We have no males because although it would not matter in terms of functionality, I believe your world's word is psychological, and the effect is that a female form appears more comforting and calming than a male's. Oruaural, in visiting worlds other than yours or Nolan, has seen a few examples where males are the nurturers as rather than females. But here, same as yours, females are more likely to calm, as the subjective aspects you might expect from a lifetime of seeing them in the role are subconsciously affecting you in the notion of seeing a woman. I wasn't completely sure I understood it, but it sounded like they had logical reasons, and I expect there might be a subtly different perception that would make one version feel more comfortable to work with versus the other. But I didn't like the implication. I wasn't sure. Not quite manipulative, but something else. We spent more time exploring the city, saw the market and a few more parks, then visited a building dedicated for testing crystal prisms. I didn't know then why or what they needed them for, but they were a nice, pretty display. I think I may have spent several hours at all of this. When I left, though, I noticed something strange about the sky. Again, there was a huge curving line, or ribbon. It stretched from one side of the horizon to the other, apparently covered with mostly farmland, but also some prairie, desert, and forest. It was also positioned in a gently sloping angle to the horizon. Piv? I figured I didn't really need to specify the question this time. Yes, the iris? I frowned. Iris? Yes, Piv explained. It is a reference to the combination of the sphere we're standing on and the disk encircling it. Looks like a great massive eye in the sky from the perspective of the other stones. As you can obviously see, it is all around the sphere, like a planetary ring, but made of solid land. It is part of what gives the other stones their diffused portion of the night. The other part is that the other stones move. They are always eclipsing themselves by their shadows. But this means that we have no regular day and night cycle as you do. We measure our time with clocks, and we measure the motion of the disk as it relates to the sphere. Why didn't Oruaural mention it before? Probably, Piv answered, because my emissary didn't feel like it was needed, as common sense would say that you inevitably saw it in the sky anyway. The emissary of madness does love surprises very much. Whether someone attempts to surprise Oruaural or when Oruaural gets the opportunity to surprise anyone else. But that extends to all surprises, including surprising you, as Oruaural knew you would be, and knows all of what you will experience here. Doubtless my lord is laughing loudly at your expense at this very moment, but I am certain that he does not mean any offense by it, for this is simply in Auroural's nature, and the emissary values you greatly as a friend, despite that you barely know him. As to understanding the iris, first, you do not know that there is no sun. Not in the conventional sense, as you know it, correct? Yes. I didn't really understand what that had to do with it, other than I would have to expect to see one in the sky by now. But something has to be giving off light, or else all would be in darkness. Yes, Piv seemed more exuberantly excited than I would have expected. That is correct. So without a sun, as you know it, what do you think would give the shifting stones both day and night? The iris? How does it do that? For its part, the iris only provides part of the shadow. Now what do you think might be the source of that light as to that shadow? I thought hard about it for a moment, but couldn't quite seem to understand what she was getting at. I don't know. We, Piv stated patiently, are at the center of the shifting stones. What does the disk of the iris obscure, relative in perspective to the other stones? I looked at the sky. The disk encircles realization. We're on the sun? Exactly. So Piv had to explain that. It also is a spoiler. But apparently the part about standing on the sun had to reveal now so that you would have a better time of visualizing it. But even if right now I can't explain why this is, I can at least explain delirium's shape. The entire sphere or pupil was a massive planetoid-sized city, while the disc-shaped iris was mostly used for agricultural farmland or ranching of livestock. In this sense, at least in shape, the two together, Auroral's delirium resembled the planet Saturn if the rings could be thought of as solid land. For visual reference, the pupil sphere is about the same size as the largest asteroid in Earth's solar system, Ceres. If the pupil could be placed right next to Earth, it would be just as large as Texas. If you happen to be connected in one way to the Lone Star State, I'm not trying to flatter anyone. I am simply using the comparison chart I remember seeing. As the iris moved through the 8 degrees of freedom, it resembled the most massive gyroscope I had ever seen. That is, if the pupil was thought of as the exact, immobile, unmoving center of the gyroscope, then the iris would be described as the outermost ring. The disc swung along its own horizontal direction, not being locked in place except for its center. It was constantly tilting on the pitch, yaw axes, and several other axes that I didn't even have names for, even with my engineering background. The speed of the movement was usually at a nearly imperceptible rate, like the sun as it passed through our sky. But I knew I didn't see it before, so it had to be moving. If this confuses you, I really am sorry. I suggest looking up any example of a tumbling gyroscope. So after the senselessly violent attack, followed by sightseeing, I came to the conclusion that perhaps it would be better to accept Auroral's offer. I'd have a real job, be able to see places, things that seemed to really stretch the imagination, and the entire point of it was to write a book about it. I couldn't imagine a more awesome experience, though I could have preferred not to be so close to a screaming monster-infested murderous warrior earlier. Piv, I think I will accept Auroral's offer, but I remember that he said something about how this mysterious ring will really help me a lot. Can you spend some time figuring it out? Her eyes flashed briefly, then Piv replied, Oruaural does wish you to experiment with learning how to use the ring, but would like you to enjoy a celebratory feast first. A feast? Why? What are we celebrating? Your acceptance of Auroral's offer, of course. This actually means great things for the shifting stones and for you. My emissary had recalled that you were very pleased with your decisions. As was mentioned, Oruaural has all knowledge of all time, insofar as it relates to the shifting stones and its emissary. Oruaural does not know all of your time, but does know Auroral's. I was just about to ask what she meant and why she kept from ever really using male pronouns like he, his, him, and so forth, when she interrupted what I was about to ask. They are expecting us and are about to manifest us close to the feasting hall. They? Who? What do you mean, manifest us? Why, Oruaural, of course. Surely you don't think his subjects actually have that kind of power, do you? Oruaural felt that you might appreciate a heads up before manifesting, so they instructed me to tell you first. But before Piv answered, we were suddenly... Why does it always have to be suddenly? Why not gradually? We were standing in a small room facing Oruaural. He was wearing what appeared to be a tawny fur-covered leather cloak for some reason. Before you ask, he says, I conjured or manifested you and Piv. But how else would you have gotten here in time? You and Piv were wandering around my city exploring. This was faster, and you are not hurt. I know I need to be considerate of when you might have special reason not to teleport you. I'm sure that you would not have wanted to say pee on the other guests if you're the guest of honor. But then, if you're my guest, doesn't that mean I'm honor? No, wait. Don't answer. Perhaps it's better that we have other places to go, other things to do. Such as hiking the Great Slate Desert and eating with the 10,000 madmen or women. But I tried. I thought Piv was talking about a feast at your palace. Yes, he exclaimed. Before I could say anything more, he threw open the doors behind him with a flourish of his hands. I admit I was still getting used to that. How everything here appeared to obey his every gesture, even if he didn't actually touch those. But then the room this revealed was something else to get used to altogether. The biggest room I ever saw, the size bigger than anything altogether. The biggest room I ever saw, the size bigger than anything my imagination could have ever described before this. The floor was slate tiles and covered with long tables arranged in a pattern of 4-pointed star-shaped groups. Seated at every table were the most diversified varieties of complexity in the people that I could imagine, in any collection of such. They stretched out as far as my eyes could see in all directions from the entrance. The moment after the doors flew open, there was a roaring cheer as everyone there cried out with happiness at seeing their plane's ruler. Oruaural walked into a golden pad and tapped his foot twice on it. There was another blink, and we seemed to be in the middle of the room, as there were now Oruaural citizens all around us. This room appeared to have no end, and yet every table had the attention of a dutiful Thunclick acting as a food server. Oruaural had stood apart from us, stretching and spreading out his wings. Yes, wings. His fur-covered cloak was actually a pair of large bat-like wings that must have been folded over his now bat-like body. I was confused about why he would appear now as a Vunger, as I remember they were called. Given that I understood now about him and his shifting stones, here it seemed Oruaural could pretty much do anything he wanted. Although unpredictable, he also seemed to really care in his crazy way, at least from what I was told. But I didn't get any chance to ask him more questions as he was rising, floating up into the air of his massive dining hall, but not flapping his wings. After he must have felt he had levitated enough, he cleared his throat with a polite-sounding and yet somehow reverberating cough. People of our shifting stones, as your emissary and ruler, I am proud of your uniqueness. All here have stories of your lives, histories of how you had lived. These are important to you, because they are a part of what has made you who you are. The vast number of patrons roared, banging the tables with delight. After waiting for them to finish, Oruaural continued. Apparently, it was a speech. If you have done some great, mighty things towards positive changes and efforts, then take pride that it has helped others. Altruism can be and is a noble form of serving our great Creator's will. In lifting up others, you also are lifted in His esteem. If you have preferred to remain simple, doing little and trying to shrink away from attention, then you have little to be rewarded for. But living for your Creator's will need not attention from others, but goodness can be done in secret as well. He wants you to use your talents, however. You can. But please do not do something good. But please do something good. Remember that you take action as something, and you still have time for what while you yet live. But if the opportunity is not presented, then you can say that you searched, at least, to do his will. For those of you who have done horrible things that you may feel ashamed of, know that your regret is the first step towards becoming the person you want to be. But do not let your regrets keep you from that goal. Abandon them if need be, but make good on their account by doing good things. The story that is important to you then is who you want to be and why. The throng roared even louder, cheering in some places, and then after some time, Oruaural continued. But every story, if it is to be known, needs a storyteller. I am your advocate, representative, and many things for my people, but if there are more worlds than just what we see here, then your stories to reach far and wide, they must be preserved by recording them. To this effort, I happily announce our scribe, the archivist for us, your representative in those far and wide places. I present Erastus Redsmith, your Thonsman. I stood, feeling embarrassed and very uncomfortable. The cacophony of the cheers from all the people made it clear that I had no reason to really be afraid of the attention, but I felt like I was being put onto a pedestal, as if set up for something completely unexpected. The praise felt unnecessary and frankly rather overwhelming. My thumb click, he ordered. Please commence in the bearing of the yummy things that the people may put in the mouth and taste of the deliciousness. Thank you, Monarch Oruaural, the crowd roared. While I was still trying to take in the sight, Oruaural was in front of me now, speaking. I couldn't even understand how he did that. I remembered he was up in the air, addressing his people, and seemingly without pausing for, well, anything, he was now speaking to me on the floor. Erastus, I want to introduce you to my wife, Lady Oruaural. I looked, and somehow I had completely missed that there was a lady, a female Vunger, dressed in a gown complementary to Oruaulal's outfit. Except he wore emerald green and yellow, while she wore purple with blue. Despite that these colors should have clashed, somehow on them it seemed to belong together. Yes, thank you, Lord Oru. She addressed him with all the smoothness of a warm summer breeze, both contrasting and complementing his deep woodsy voice. I am sorry that I wasn't here for this first day in our shifting stones. I was attending with the other emissaries of the Creator's restoration of the Loom. He has reset all of the strings now and corrected all of the errors from the theft. Of course, you will know all the details during our consumption. She smiled, amused, as though sharing a private joke that only she and her husband knew. I was still confused about the way they were referring to each other, when she abruptly turned and looked directly at me with her piercing yet friendly gaze. I am Oruaural, wife of Lord Oru, and mistress of the shifting stones, along with my husband, their master. It is good to meet you, Erastus. I hope you and your people find our stories quite pleasant. Did you just appear just now? I was sure I hadn't seen her in the room or anywhere for that matter up to this point. Yes, silly human, she said bemusedly, as if I should have known that already. Didn't I just say that I was the mistress of the shifting stones? I am the emissary of madness, after all. But my mind failed as I gibbered this, pointing rapidly back and forth. But Oruaural, he said that he was the emissary of madness. Oh, Oruaural smiled sweetly. But of course he did, because, as Oru told you, he is the emissary of madness. Then how... Am I also the emissary of madness? Oruaural finished my question. Why, that's simple, mortal. Oru and I are both the same person. There is only one emissary of madness, obviously. I looked quickly from her to Oruaural. He didn't really appear any different, and he had an already separate presence himself. I backed up a little to make sure I had them both in my field of view. But I tried, if you're two people... No. Oru injected. Really, only one person. Now that you've already accepted the position I offered, I'll explain more right now, I promise. But first, I want to let you ask your question. Alright, I tried again. If you're Oruaural and he's Oru, I pointed respectively, how is it that you are actually both the same person? Because, Oruaural began again, I am the woman. I am the man, Oru said. But then they said the next part in complete and total union, word for word, all of the pronunciation exactly the same between them, except for the gender-based tones of their voices. When the shifting stones lacked the presence of its emissary, I was a mortal, though incomplete I was and am now a person. But before, I was only half the whole. Now that I'm with Oruaural, they said each other's names respectively, looking at each other, then back at me. I am fully complete. With the spirit of my creator imbued into my spirit, I used to be mortal, woman, man. But then I assumed into the emissary of madness. This was achieved at the moment of our ascension into one, as we completed the halves by joining together. The story of how this happened, along with that of our people, is why I brought you here, so that it can be told. But, I persisted, you're his wife, a woman, and I pointed to the other. You are her husband, a man. You are two different people. No, they said, I am one. Before I was in two and incomplete. Now that I am one, I am complete. Even mortals from your world have this. Your parents, for example. They have such a strongly bonded marriage that in many ways they act, think, and feel as one person. But the union I have is simply more complete in its connections. But more because I have ascended to become the emissary of madness. Now, this is not something to say that downplays their bond or anyone else's, because it is simply the state of their being. What I am is simply the state of my being. This, I managed. Too confusing. I suppose, the duo said, that when I met you as my male incarnation, I could have simply introduced myself as Oru, and then explained this duality you've just experienced, as you refer to it, later. But then, if you knew my nature in that way before now, we wouldn't be having this delightfully mad conversation now, would we? There were obviously so many more things that I realized I didn't understand. But that was also conflicting with how I just wanted to get on with things so that I could try figuring things out as I went along. And while the celebration was in a feasting hall that was clearly bigger on the inside than it really was, it was really just a big formal dinner. We ate and talked about a great many more things but I shouldn't say more than that. Soon I was so stuffed that I said I was going back to my room. Again, because of the different day-night cycle they had as compared to Earth's, this was time for my evening, while the time for them was still around midday. I was grateful for the lack of a sun and moon when I thought about it that way. I was sure that my biological clock would be giving me the worst sense of jet lag. Despite relaxing in bed, I had trouble trying to get to sleep, with all the thoughts, feelings, and memories of my past few days being a jumble. But eventually, my sheer tiredness overcame it as I drifted off. That's it for Chapter 2 of Ineffable UI. Again, this book is a work in progress. It is available to read on Wattpad if you want to go look it up. I'll also be posting a link to it. That way you can easily find it and go read it and give your feedback to the author. Have a great day and keep reading, bookworms.